Hi, welcome. Sorry that it's been a while since I posted the last video, but I have many reviews that will be coming across through the next few days. I just came back from watching the new adaptation of Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City. This movie, as many will know, does not have the best reputation, not because of itself, but because of how previous movies have been made and how they have basically told a story separate from those from the games. For those that are new to this IP, Resident Evil comes from a video game series that has many entries from Capcom, and the first games had much more of a horror suspense focus, and then later on they started to become much more action oriented. And now in the more recent games like Resident Evil 7 Biohazard and Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 8, they have focused more on bringing back that horror element and that thriller feeling. Although I have never played the original games, I have watched walkthroughs online of the first and second game, so I had a good idea of what they were about and their tone. So personally, although I have seen all the other Resident Evil movies, I always felt frustrated that they never had adapted those stories, which for me were very interesting, to the big screen in a more faithful manner. I've heard mixed comments about this film from other places, and I'll be very straightforward about some of those points that have been criticized. But I would like to say that I really loved this movie. I really enjoyed how they took the story of the first and second game and created a horror vibe, both in terms of the atmosphere, the music, the lighting. They really went with trying to portray the horror aspect from those games, and I think that they did it really well. Since they are bringing for this movie the stories of the first and second games, please forget everything that you've seen from the other movies. This is a reboot, let's say, where they're telling the story from the beginning and captures what happens in games 1 and 2. But instead of being prisoner to having to portray everything that happens in each of those games, I think they did a wise choice of being faithful to those two games while creating a cohesive narrative that would fit for one movie. I thought the storytelling was really good, the pacing. There has been criticism about the CGI, and I disagree. I really think the CGI was really good, especially for the monsters. What other movies, and even some of the Marvel movies, do to hide their bad CGI sometimes, not all movies, but some of them, is that they will always put their enemies that are computer generated in low lit environments. So either the enemies only attack at night or in very dark places, and the images are really blurred with lots of action, and this is just so that you can hide the imperfections of how well the modeling of that characters are. Here, although lots of the scenes do happen in dark places because of that horror vibe, when they show the enemies and the zombies or other creatures, they're not afraid of showing you them in focus, and I thought that they were really well done. As I mentioned before, I really enjoyed the atmosphere that the movie tries to provoke. And we're used to having so many cheap jump scares in other movies, in proper horror movies, that I was very happy to see that I was surprised and I did fall for a few jump scares, but they were always well placed and they didn't feel cheap. So I really thought that the movie did that really well, and that's something that not many movies do nowadays. I know that there has been quite a bit of criticism because of the portrayal of one of the main characters, Leon S. Kennedy, and because in the games he is much more of a badass and a very accomplished, confident individual. And while I understand that criticism and how much this will affect you depends from person to person, I really like the comment of a good friend of mine who is a fan of the games and of the character, and he said that initially his reaction was, "Oh, this bothers me," but then he said, "Oh, let me see how this character develops during the movie." And while I don't think at the end of the movie he's yet at that level that people know him from the video games, what my friend felt was they had to portray him as a more inexperienced and developing character, or else he would be too overpowered he wouldn't have reacted in the same way in those situations, and that would have reduced the tension in the movie. After hearing that opinion, I think that it is, again, how much value you want to put on that will depend from person to person. But for me, in terms of having an interesting narrative, and hopefully one that we'll see continued in more movies, I'm happy to sacrifice and see a character develop and then become that what we're most used to. Again, unfortunately, this movie has a lot of baggage that is not deserved, but because of the reputation of the previous movies, which in general were really bad, and many people now probably won't go to see this movie because they're used to saying, "Oh, it's another Resident Evil movie," and I'm used to them being bad, or at least hearing that they are bad. So if you enjoy a good horror movie, I would definitely encourage you to watch this movie. If you're a fan of the video games, go watch it and let me know in the comments what you thought about this adaptation. But I really enjoyed this, and I was looking forward to an adaptation like this one of this story for many years. So I really hope that the box office and revenues are enough to warrant their trust in creating the continuation of the other games. Thank you, and see you next time.